Don't worry, I'm not going to follow that up with another song. You have to wait for the after party for that. So as you enjoy your dinner, get ready for your dessert, I want to take a couple of moments and help you understand some of the backstory of how we got here tonight. It was October 2023. We had invited ourselves to Chapel Hill, a small group of Black alumni, for some celebration about the work that had been going on over the past 4 or 5 years or so. Amongst that group, we had the legend himself, Mr. Harvey Kennedy. In a very casual way, he said, you know what? We should get this group together. We should get the entire Black community together for a weekend in Chapel Hill. Make sure it's not on a football game weekend. Just bring them all together, have a banquet, get together. It'll be awesome. And this is the same story we've been hearing for probably about 2 or 3 years in a row. And so finally we said, we better do this thing or Mr. Kennedy ain't gonna never stop making this suggestion to us. And so in that day, in the top of Morehead House, a group of us sat down in a circle and we started brainstorming. What would this event look like? What could it be? And so what you are witnessing tonight is more than a year in the making. And so first I say thank you for taking that vision and helping us turn it into a reality. Now, my mama taught me a lot of things, but there's 2 things in particular she wanted me to make sure I keep in mind in life. One is always go back to say thank you. And 2 is when you say thank you, don't call people by name because you're always going to forget somebody. Tonight, I'm only going to listen to one of those things that she said. And so y'all don't tell on me because I'm going to call a few names and I'm sure I'm going to forget somebody. So I start with Mr. Harvey Kennedy for being the trailblazer, for setting the vision for what this community could be, and for speaking into existence this weekend celebration before it even happened. Y'all gonna hear a lot about him tonight. You already heard a lot about him, but there's one element I want to share about the type of gentleman that he is. We have been very intentional in the language that we use, calling him the first Black Morehead-Cain graduate, because he wanted to make sure that we acknowledge Mr. Rich Matthews, who was the first Black scholar selected in 1969. He was here at Carolina. He has joined us at some of our Morehead Forums events in 97 and 2009. And while Mr. Kennedy is the first that matriculated and received his degree, our history is not complete without also acknowledging Rich Matthews. Next, I gotta show some love to Karen Stevenson, who I've only had the pleasure of interacting with this weekend. And I won't steal the thunder of other people who are gonna speak about her tonight, but having your presence here, it takes this thing to the next level. Thank you. Y'all heard me talk about that meeting we had in a circle about a year ago planning for this event. Who was that convening of people? We have something called the Black Alumni Working Group. There's several of those individuals who are in the room today. I won't call all by name, but this was sparked more than 5 years ago, thinking about the many instances that were happening on campus, happening in our community, and this collective got together to say, all right, we gotta meet the moment. We gotta make sure that we are there for our scholars. And that momentum kept growing, and it kept growing, and it kept growing. And that turned into the Black Alumni Scholar Affinity Group. And that turned into the steering committee that's here today. And so many other things have been sparked. And so for those members, you know who you are. Your work matters. It's led us to today. And we haven't peaked yet. We still going. Thank you for what you've done. Thank you for what you've invested in us. To the Morehead-Cain Foundation, the common thread that brings us all here, right? For giving us the spaciousness to have this event, for giving us the financial foundation to start planning, to giving us the logistical excellence to figure out how in the world to put all these different things together. I appreciate that. Of course, our leader, Chris Bradford, we have Jesse, we have Laura, we got Montez, we got Kenya, we got Sarah, we got David Greer, and I know there's some people I'm missing, but to the entire foundation staff, thank you. And then there's probably a familiar face that y'all see in the room, Chuck. So Chuck, in case you didn't know you certified when you get introduced simply by the first name and there's nothing else said and the people recognize it. So in case there was any question, that's what it is. As I mentioned when we first kicked off, there are many of you in the room who said that this experience is incomplete without our current scholars present. And so you stepped up to the plate, you gave some donations to ensure that our scholars could participate in this weekend. And that really made this go to a different level of excellence with those intergenerational collaborations. Thank you for doing that. We got a couple of people in this community that love to see something that's happening and just add their own flavor and swagger, sprinkle it in there, and just elevate the experience. Antonio McBroom and Emmanuel Bello from the class of 2008 hooking us up with the Carolina basketball ticket so we can go cheer on the hills. And then there's some people who said, Ray, I see the vision. I know what this community can be, and I want to take a good idea and turn it into an excellent experience. Those are some of our marquee sponsors for this weekend. And most of them asked me not to say anything. And so I'm going against their wishes, and I'm going to call them by name. We have Barbara Hyde from the class of 83, Chip Tillman from the class of 86, Catherine Dunleavy from the class of 91, Pam Austin Oliver from the class of 96, Will Austin from 2000, Tamara Sutton from the class of 2000. Everything that you have experienced this weekend, maybe we created the ideas, but their investment allowed us to execute upon it. And so let's give them some gratitude. And then finally, y'all heard us talk about this steering committee, right? I can't get you into all the war stories of what's going on over the past year, but there's been some text threads. My phone battery is in trouble right now. There's been some long Zoom calls. There's been some waves of emotions, but they stuck with it. If you get them after a couple more glasses of wine, they'll probably tell you that Ray hoodwinked them. He was like, oh, we want to do a little event, get the group together for a little something. Yeah, sure, Ray, I'll help out. And then they start seeing the agenda. They're like, oh, you talking about an event. So on top of families, on top of leadership responsibilities at work, on top of all the other commitments that they have, they kept showing up. And they took the charge, and they were proactive, and they were thinking about many of the details that you have experienced but didn't even know you were experiencing. They were thinking about it ahead of time. And so, who are those people? Robin Hadley, Janora McDuffie, Jess Jolly, Janelle Moreau, Kelsey King, and my man Elliot Musi. They put the work in so we can all experience this. And so if y'all would please help me to give a big round of applause to them. Now, Steerco, I hope after that round of applause, y'all will forgive me, and I promise I'll give you at least a 2-week hiatus from any other planning conversations. So with that in mind, I want to invite one of our fellow steer committee members up to do another special presentation as we continue the gratitude.
It's a hot mic. I hope it's okay if I just talk to you like family tonight. Before I introduce myself, I just want to thank you all for attending this weekend. I met someone, Joel, who came as far as London. So that's just awesome. And I really have enjoyed every single conversation I've had with each of you. I find them very exhilarating, and they really fill a cup for me no matter what we're talking about. As a young professional, these spaces are actually a little bit hard to find, and I think the bar is so high because I consider our community to be the epitome of Black excellence. So your presence here has been a great gift to me. If I haven't yet talked to you, I am Kelsey King. I'm from the class of 2021, so I graduated about 3 years ago. And if you don't get anything else from me tonight, I just want you to know that I consider the Morehead-Cain Scholarship to be the biggest blessing of my life thus far. The best is always yet to come, but when I revisit memory lane and as I've gone through the programming of this weekend, there are so many positive core memories that I've formed with this community and with this scholarship and this foundation. Of course, the financial blessing and covering over the 4 years, right? That I don't even think has truly dawned on me, the significant impact of. I don't have to go into the transformative summer experiences either, though as recently as 2 days ago, I told my sister about this story in Alaska where we had to, 40 minutes into our hike, go back for a U-Dig-It, the tiny shovel to dig holes with, to go back to the campsite and it wasn't even there, and I was comparing it to how that's literally what I do in consulting. Go back for the U-Dig-It that isn't there. But there's so many like positive core memories that have made me who I am today. And Chuck, thank you for coming back. I don't know if you remember, but my semifinalist interview at the Charlotte Convention Center, you were the leader of my team interview. And we had like this team exercise. And you know, I'm like 16, 17, I'm like on go, like everything has to be right. And Chuck asks us to debrief what we learned from the team exercise. And I'm like, whatever you say, it's gotta be good. Like, it's gotta be good. And I go, well, we all know what we're here for, but I appreciate that we were all able to come together for a good answer. And I was later like, why would I say that? Why would I put that out there like that? But that's a testament to transparency and authenticity, I guess. But that's a core memory formed. And obviously you liked it, so here we are. And then another really positive core memory of my scholar experience was finding out if I got the scholarship. And it was me, my mom, and my sister in our kitchen, and I clicked the button, and it says congrats. And there's one person missing from the kitchen, and it's my dad, who has worked day and night for the past 20 years. So we call him and we tell him that I've made it, that I'm a Morehead-Cain Scholar. And all he can say on repeat is, to God be the glory, to God be the glory, to God be the glory. That's all he could say. That's all he could say. So many positive memories that I have of the scholar experience. And then I'm being flown around the world, and I'm shaping my worldview, and I'm developing into this young lady, and I'm becoming more headstrong and a little more seasoned, and it's really, really cool. But then nostalgia is kind of two-sided for me, because the scholar experience, blessing after blessing, but the student experience, that was a little different. It didn't feel like blessing after blessing, okay? So like, no one in here needs to know the academic rigor of attending a public Ivy. So first day of class, freshman year, I'm in a class called Iranian Prison Literature. Like literature written by prisoners in Iran or Iran. Like, I don't know what it is, and I didn't stay to find out. The class was dropped before I left the classroom. And then the classes I couldn't drop, AP or calculus, test scores looked like winter temps, like indistinguishable. And they're saying it's normal It's okay. So academics is like A honor roll. That's a wrap. That was fun. Socially, I was raised in a predominantly white area, which is fine. But now I'm seeing like Black groups become organized, and Black affinity groups are a thing, and BSM and Black Student Union, and I got my group of Black girlfriends now, and this is cool, and I'm developing. But there's some unwritten rules to that too, and there's politics in that too, and I'm figuring out where I fit in that too. So that's a little stressful at times. And maybe the cherry on top is this global pandemic that sends me home in the middle of junior year, and maybe I can become accustomed to doing school online for the rest of my college career, but then I'm really rattled by the passing of really special loved ones in my life, 3 actually during that time too, and that's a little hard to deal with. That's really hard to deal with. So the scholar experience and the student experience, very strong delineation for me. And it felt really tough at times, and it's even more personally disappointing in the moment when the dream scholarship and the dream school and the dream travel opportunities and the dream service trips, they seem a little disconnected from the lived experience and the coming of age of being in my early 20s. The great news is that while I was surprised by all of the roadblocks and challenges that I did not anticipate, I serve a God who is never surprised and who actually equips us with the tools and the protective barriers and the armory and the weaponry that we need during challenging seasons. And we talk about divine timing, and how divine was it that I started school August 2017, and 6 months later, February 2018, Montez Thomas, scholar advisor, enters the foundation and joins the staff, and is the gift that I didn't know I'd been given until a long time later. And I mentioned that Morehead-Cain was the biggest blessing I've ever received, but Montez was really the face of that blessing. And he was the face, and I love that looking back, no matter what the day had in store, no matter what the semester would have in store, no matter what the test score was gonna be, no matter what crazy Instagram post I was gonna get to encounter that week, one thing I did know was who I would go to when I was in need of anything. And there were so many things I needed you for. When I needed an alumni name, I'm going to Montez. When I needed an idea for a summer enrichment opportunity, I know I'm going to Montez. There was no other college advisor. There was no college professor. It was Montez Thomas. When I needed one letter of rec, there he was. And when I needed the second and the third and the fourth, no questions asked, here you go. When I was in my childhood bedroom during the pandemic, wondering how I'm gonna do online school with the passing of special friends, one of which was a scholar in my class from Charlotte, Montez calls. How are you? Where are you? How are you feeling? Are you okay? And for me, it's a little more than a piece of paper. The letter of rec is a little more than a piece of paper. It's this hope I have in my back pocket that whatever opportunity I pursue next, I've already proven, I've already earned, I've already achieved, I'm already a Morehead-Cain. So whatever the world puts forth, Montez, you just helped me to throw weight around, to pound the table, to be my advocate. And your representation at the foundation has been so significant for me. And I know it's a lot of hard work, especially with the increase in the number of Black scholars now. I can't imagine, because the love and support and encouragement that you give to our community, it does not go unnoticed. And I know it is a lot of work. And while current scholars may feel but not totally realize your significance, and alum may hear about it but didn't get to see it in action, I feel so blessed that I was able to directly experience your blessing. And on behalf of the Black Morehead-Cain community, I want to say thank you. And personally, I just want to thank you that even when things did not feel excellent, that you saw the inner excellence within me. So, on that note, we would love to honor you with the Champion of Excellence Award. Thank you, Montez, and we love you so much.
Thank you. And thank you, Kelsey, for representing the young alum of this community so beautifully. Thank you. And I'm gonna make this quick because we have met this woman before, and she has dropped dimes today that we are all taking with us right here from this weekend. I asked her a little earlier how she wanted to be introduced. She was just like, just say, I'm the cousin, the sister, the powerhouse. I added the powerhouse because it was just not enough. From exit 148, Robin Hadley, everybody.
Hang on, hang on. So, we heard a little bit about Judge Stevenson's bio today, but I know there's some folks here this evening that didn't get to hear that. So you may hear some things you heard earlier, and I hope a few things that you haven't heard before. The Honorable Karen Stevenson serves as Chief United States Magistrate Judge for the Central District of California, where in addition to handling her own docket of criminal and civil matters, she provides administrative leadership for 24 United States magistrate judges. Appointed to the federal bench in 2015, Judge Stevenson is Vice Chair of the Magistrate Judge Executive Board for the Ninth Circuit. She's a member of the Judicial Council of the Association of Business Trial Lawyers and serves on the board of the Federal Bar Association of Los Angeles. She's an elected member of the American Law Institute, a fellow of the American Bar Foundation. For the past 9 years, she has served on the steering committee for Just the Beginning, a summer legal institute, a week-long program that introduces high school students from across greater Los Angeles to opportunities for careers in the law. In the broader community, Stevenson has served as a trustee for the Rhodes Trust at Oxford University and the district secretary for Rhodes Scholarship Selection Committee in Southern California, probably one of the most competitive districts in the country, if not the world. She's past president of the Women's Care Cottage, an organization serving young women coming out of emergency shelters, foster care, and probation. She has served on the board of directors of the Arts and Sciences Foundation for UNC, and most important, she is the mother of twin boys. Judge Stevenson earned her JD with distinction at Stanford Law School. She earned her MA in European History at Magdalen College, Oxford, as a Rhodes Scholar, and received a BA in History, Phi Beta Kappa, at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. Last night, we heard from the director of the Southern Oral History Collection use the term energy taking, characterizing events, activities, or even committees that she and likely many of us participate in where it feels like all the energy we have is going out to something. Our profession, our family and friends, to people who may or may not like us or love us, to causes that may or may not succeed. Those events, activities, and committees are energy taking. But I say to myself, this weekend's events with all of you and being on this campus are energy making. When I stand at this podium and see you, when I think about the weekend and what our next gathering may look like, Ray, I am thankful. I am grateful. I see Black excellence. It makes me know that really anything is possible when we are judged by the content of our character. The substance of our service, to use the words of Judge Stevenson, when we are judged not on the color of our skin or our credit score. There is a phrase, I believe, that says, if I can see it, maybe I can be it. That is how I think of the photo of a young black woman in a short afro with the words Rhodes Scholarship captioned when I came to the foundation building for the first time at the age of 17 years old. Like you, we came to the foundation to interview, to mingle, to dine and engage with the best and brightest across the United States, across North Carolina, and the world. When I saw Karen Stevenson's photo for the first time at 17, I'm sure I smiled because I can't recall any other headshots or portraits of women who look like me in that building or on the tours when I came for Finalist Weekend. Who is she? What is a Rhodes Scholarship? She looks happy in the photo. Is she? What is her story? Many years later, in 2008, I finally met Karen Stevenson in person in the garden of Rhodes House at the Rhodes Trust 30th anniversary of Women Rhodes Scholars. Today, Karen is a trustee emeritus of the Rhodes Trust. What a journey. Matriculated at Taft in Connecticut, the first year the school matriculated girls. Won a Morehead Scholarship the first year it was open to women. I don't really even have the words to describe how I felt when the woman in the photo came to life in front of me at the garden at Rhodes House. I had looked at that photo for 4 years and wondered how she made it through UNC and through Oxford, through the good days, through the bad days, through the days she may have wished to be somewhere else, and the days when she was the only in a place of so many who may or may not have wanted her there. What was it like to be at Oxford, having won a scholarship, the Rhodes Scholarship, just 2 years after the scholarship opened to women, which, by the way, occurred only after official acts of Parliament in order to change Mr. Rhodes' will so that women could attend? Leadership, character, scholarship, physical vigor. Was Karen ready? Was Carolina ready? In the words of the late Dr. Clara Stevenson, Karen's mom, I've tried to teach both my girls that things are the least important. You don't have to have a pretty house. I've taught them you don't expect anyone to give you anything. They'll get what they earn. She said that in 1979. She was focused on excellence in character. So in her mother's words, she said, so I don't see what Karen's done as so unusual. I don't see it unusual for anyone who can get the right kind of education. Karen said at the tender age of 22, before she embarked on her journey, the Rhodes Scholarship is an honor, and I do feel honored, but it doesn't tell me anything about myself that I didn't already know. It is simply an external recognition of what someone else saw me. I measure myself by my personal ideals and standards. When I look in the mirror, I don't say to myself, I'm a Rhodes Scholar. When she accepted the Taft Alumni Medal honoree in 2022 at her high school, she said, my 4 years at Taft gave me, a kid from a DC public school, from a single-parent home, an exceptional academic experience. But more than academics at Taft, I learned that I could thrive in an unfamiliar land and that it matters to make it easier for those who follow. Being first is not nearly as important to me, she said, as making sure that there is a wide open door for those who come behind. Tonight, we honor you, Judge Stevenson, for believing in yourself and laying the groundwork for us to come behind you. Thank you for stepping out in the water when you could not see the shore on the other side, or even the breadth and depth of the expanse into which you were stepping. Thank you for being a photo that smiled back at me for 4 years, that let me know if you could do it, maybe I could too. In recognition of your groundbreaking achievement as the first African American woman Morehead-Cain Scholar, we thank you and we honor you with the Trailblazer Award.
Thank you, everyone. I don't cry easily, and I didn't think I was going to have to cry tonight, but thank you. My mom died in 1982, about a year after I came back from Oxford. And so I have been without her all these years of my adulthood. But she's very present with me tonight, and I thank her for that. I thank all of you for being here, the young scholars, the steering committee, Chuck Lovelace. Carolina is very dear to my heart. Having said this morning that I had no intention of coming here, I just want you to know this place, this experience, your presence is so meaningful to me. And my heart is really full. We are staying, I had the opportunity to stay. I'm gonna make this really short because I said what I had to say this morning. Anyway, and it's late and y'all wanna go dancing and drink some more. Staying at Morehead House. And that is a beautiful, luxuriously appointed place. And as you walk in there, the steering committee's staying there too. So as you walk in, Uncle Mott's photo is on the wall. And his wife's photo is on the other wall, and his father's photo is on the back wall of Morehead House. And he is a complicated character, as all of us are. But there are very few people who have given the vast majority of their wealth for the well-being of others. And for the well-being, particularly of this state. I'm not from North Carolina, but the fact that we are all here, I deeply am grateful for John Motley Morehead III. Complicated character, but a man of vision and a man of deep, deep generosity. Some of us today went on the tour, the Carolina Black and Blue tour about this campus and how much of this campus was built by enslaved people. Complicated characters, complicated place. I still love this place. I still love the experience that I had here and the platform that it provided for me to move on to the Rhodes Scholarship and all the complications of growing the hell up. It ain't always easy, I'm just saying. But one of the things that this scholarship particularly has provided, and I talk to the young scholars right now, is the opportunity to do the postgraduate travel experiences. So a number of us in the room went on the civil rights tour. Could you raise your hand if you went on the civil rights tour in April? How exceptional and extraordinary was that? Now, I was a history major at Chapel Hill. I studied European history at Oxford. And to go to the museum that Brian Stevenson has created in Montgomery, I did not know before that experience that 14 million Black people were transported to this country. 2 million Africans died and drowned, their souls at the bottom of the sea as a part of the Middle Passage. I did not know before that trip with Morehead Scholars and sponsored by the Foundation for Alums that as late as 1970, because some folks were asking about this earlier today, a young Black man was killed in the pit. That's right, the pit where we barbecued and danced and did the Cupid Shuffle badly. I did it badly, I'm here to say, this afternoon, was killed in the pit in 1970. And his name was James Cates Jr. He was stabbed when a fight broke out after a dance-a-thon at the pit. 1970. That's our lifetime, many of us in this room. We are not talking about long ago things. We are not talking about the dim and distant past. And the 3 white men who were charged for his killing were acquitted by an all-white jury after 2 hours of deliberation. No one was ever convicted for that young man's killing. Fast forward, we are here. the gift of our presence, the gift of our excellence that has been exemplified this weekend. We stand on the shoulders of ancestors. My mother, your parents, grandparents, aunties, cousins, Mr. Cates. This is hallowed ground, folks. This is hallowed ground. And it is not always easy and comfortable to find our bearings, as it were, with that history. But we are present here, and we move forward from here. And I would share with you tonight the words of one of my favorite authors, the great Toni Morrison, Nobel Prize winner. If you don't have her, The Source of Self-Regard, I strongly suggest you get it. This is a collection of her writings, essays, and speeches. In 1988, she gave the commencement address at Sarah Lawrence. And she said this, and this is what I would like to leave you with tonight. She said her purpose in giving that graduation address wasn't, to celebrate graduation and it's a celebratory time. She said, I want to provoke. Literally, I want to provoke. And what she talked about that day in 1988 was dreaming. And she said this. In giving her graduation address, she said, I'm not interested in your happiness. I'm sure it's not all it's cracked up to be, happiness. We're told that the pursuit of happiness is, part of our American legacy. But Toni Morrison invited us to dream. And she said this. Dreaming is the preamble to problem solving. I want to talk about the activity you were always warned against as being wasteful, impractical, hopeless. I want to talk about dreaming. For dreaming is not irresponsible. It is first-order human business. It is not entertainment, it is work. When Martin Luther King said, I have a dream, he was not playing. He was serious. When he imagined it, envisioned it, created it in his own mind, it began to be. And we must dream it too, to give it the heft and stretch and longevity it deserves. Don't let anybody convince you that this is the way the world is and therefore must be. We are the moral inhabitants of the galaxy. So when you enter those places of trust or power, dream a little before you think. So your thoughts, your solutions, your directions, your choices about who lives and who doesn't, who flourishes and who doesn't, will be worth the very sacred life you have chosen to live. You are not helpless. You are not heartless. And you have time. We have the gift of time. We have the gift of this extraordinary Morehead-Cain family. We have the gift of vision and support. And mostly, we have the gift of one another, the gift of a community. When I came to Carolina, I was alone. When I went to Oxford, I was mostly alone. Nobody in this room need ever be alone again. Dream, be provoked, be dissatisfied. The fact that the world is the way it is not the way it has to be. May we all keep dreaming together. Thank you.
Somebody drops heat like that, I don't even want to touch the mic afterwards. I feel like I need some gloves or something. This is hot. We're going to keep it moving because, like I said, we got this dance floor and we want to make sure it gets some good use. I was asked briefly to say a couple of words about Mr. Harvey Kennedy, and the first thing I said was, no, thank you. What can you say about a man like that? What can you say that hasn't already been said? What can you say that he can't say better himself? And so I think about the things I like about him. Number one, if you ever catch him at a party or something standing next to his twin brother, they will actually sync up the way they shake their glasses, and they don't even talk about it. It's fascinating. The other thing is, he knows a lot about a lot. You can say any one sentence, and he's probably going to have a first-hand story, and it's going to include at least 3 famous people that you haven't heard of, but when you go research him, you're like, he won't plan. He wasn't making up names. This person actually exists. Try it. And then finally, his storytelling ability. He can put you in a moment like it just happened this afternoon. No matter what time, no matter what place. And that's just some of the many qualities that Mr. Harvey Kennedy brings to this life and to this community. But I've only had the pleasure of knowing him for a few years, and we had some great one-on-one dinners, but I wanted to bring somebody else up to give you a better perspective of who Mr. Harvey Kennedy is. And that's Bob Wynn, who you had the pleasure of meeting earlier today. But what I'll say about him is that he has a hunger for impact and a passion for learning. And if you spend more than 30 seconds talking to him, it'll be absolutely clear to you. And so with that, I invite Bob up to share a little bit more about our honoree.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It's really an honor to be here today, and I really appreciate and congratulate the organizers of this event today. This is an event that I really never saw coming. My experience as being a Morehead and being here at UNC back in the 70s was that we were not really exposed to one another other than the reception where we might receive our payment. And after that, I got the impression it was even somewhat expected that we would be discreet and low-key about being a Morehead. Therefore, I didn't really get to know the Moreheads as well as maybe some of you who came along a little bit later have gotten to know one another. And even surprisingly, a person who's very much a networker such as I am, I really didn't even get a chance to meet some of the other African American Moreheads. The Kennedy twins were not in my class per se, so I just saw them somewhat in passing as I lived on South Campus and they were on North Campus, and we were quite collegial and almost like a family in James Hall. And we would often really be excited when we would see the Kennedy twins. And they were just remarkably identical. And we were really fascinated by the fact that they seemed to just be very coordinated in how they even orchestrated their appearance. And we used to sort of, in a fun way, just wonder, well, do they shop together and reach consensus on what they're going to buy? And then do they take turns just deciding each morning one would be determining what they're going to wear for that particular day? And we even had a fun time sort of thinking about whether one of us could tell the difference between the two better than the other. And even today, I had to look twice before I saw the difference between the two of them. I always prided myself on being able to somewhat tell the difference. But all seriousness aside, these two individuals, as I thought about just a few remarks that I would make today, I wanted to emphasize that they always carried themselves, both of them, with dignity and grace. And there was never a time that you saw them over-exercised or emotional in ways that some of us get from time to time. And I always appreciated that. And when I think back, that's the one thing that I remember about them is their even-keeledness at all times. Well, when I started just looking up the Kennedys and just came across several articles. One of them talked about the Kennedys having this national impact on the ethos of America. Well, they were talking about another great ancestry name that had the same name, Kennedys, the Kennedys of Massachusetts, that were, I guess, somewhat led off by Joseph and Rose Kennedy. And they talked about the impact, the deep impact that they've had on the politics and other aspects of society in the United States. Those of us who grew up in North Carolina, especially myself in central North Carolina, when we think of the Kennedys, we think of that North Carolina set of Kennedys that were actually led off by the lineage that is no second fiddle to those other Kennedys. I read about Harold Sr., who is the grandfather of Harvey, and I think it was Miss Hall Kennedy, who was the grandmother, and they really spawned an impact on society beyond just their own venue, but they had an impact that really resonated throughout the state and even beyond into the country at large. They were the leaders and pace setters when it came to civil rights, and they had wonderful successes as it related to one that Harvey talked about earlier today, which featured my hometown, Greensboro, which was that Simpkins case against the city of Greensboro, where they literally changed the society locally and was able to help open the doors to public facilities throughout the entire state, and I think it spilled over into the country. Also, the litigation related to Hogan, I believe that was a sexual harassment case, which I understand was the first in the entire state of North Carolina, and at the time was one of the largest settlements that had ever come about in that time. So we are really appreciative of the entire family. I believe that Harvey was quoted at one time saying that he wanted to carry on the lineage and the impact that his family has had over the years. And through Kennedy, and Kennedy, they have been able to have that impact. And I do give credit to the Morehead Foundation, which was able to refute the tradition and identify Harvey L. Kennedy as someone who was deserving to be on the stage as a Morehead Scholar here at the University of North Carolina. And with the guidance of his entire family, we really appreciate all that he's been able to do for the state of North Carolina and for society at large. Harvey L. Kennedy, 50 years later, has lived up to his determination to be a legacy for his family. With that, Harvey, we thank you and we congratulate you on receiving the Pioneer Award for the University of North Carolina Morehead Scholars. Congratulations. Thank you very much. Congratulations.
Thanks a lot. Man.
Yes.
You hold that for me while I get
Yes.
to speak.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
You want me to stay up here?
No, you can sit. You can sit.
No.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Bob. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. What is it that binds us to this place like no other? It is not the well or the bell or the stone walls or the crisp October nights or the memory of dogwoods blooming. Our loyalty is not only to William Richardson Davie, the founder of Carolina, though we are proud of what he did over 200 years ago. Not even to Coach Dean Smith, though we are proud of his leadership in building the Carolina basketball program. No, our love for this place is based on the fact that it is as it was meant to be, the university of the people. Those moving words were written by Charles Kuralt, a distinguished alumnus of this university and a great storyteller for many, many years on CBS News. And they express the greatness of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. I want to share my reflections with you this evening about my Morehead journey at Carolina. In 1970, I entered Carolina as the only African American Morehead Scholar in my class. I never looked at myself as a pioneer. 54 years have passed since I arrived at Carolina as a freshman. And in those 54 years, tremendous progress has been made. Today at Carolina, there are currently 68 Black Morehead-Cain Scholars. You come from all over the United States and from Great Britain, Canada, and several other countries. The number of Black Morehead-Cain alumni today totals over 260. I want to salute all of our Morehead-Cain Black alumni who are here with us this weekend. The impact you have made in your communities has been monumental. You are leaders in business, in medicine, in law, in government, and in education. And to our current Morehead-Cain Scholars who are here this weekend, we look forward to the many contributions that you will make in the future at Carolina and in life. Over the last 54 years, the Morehead-Cain Foundation has been well served by 4 outstanding executive directors or presidents, and I've known all of them: Roy Armstrong, Mebane Pritchett, Chuck Lovelace, and Chris Bradford. Chuck and Chris are here with us this evening, and I would ask both of them to stand at this time and be recognized. Thank you. I've been privileged to have known each of these fine leaders. The Morehead-Cain Program has grown to great heights with each of these leaders. What was the Morehead Program like in the early 1970s? First, it was all male. It was only after I graduated that women scholars were included in the Morehead Program. Each semester, I would come to the Morehead building to pick up my scholarship check. And during most of my time at Carolina, Mebane Pritchett was the executive director. And Mebane was a scholar in one of the early Morehead classes. He graduated from Harvard Law School and went on to practice law on Wall Street. He always took the time to meet with me to discuss my Carolina experience. He was kind and a man of great class and warmth. He wrote my letter of recommendation to Harvard Law School. Unlike today, in the early 1970s, there was no structured summer program. I had great summer jobs, but they were due to personal relationships. I spent 2 summers working in the management training program at Wachovia Bank and Trust Company at a time when Wachovia was the premier bank in North Carolina, and it was headquartered in Winston-Salem. I will always remember that John Medlin, president and CEO of Wachovia, took the time during those 2 summers to periodically meet with me and see how my summer was going. In 1969, the year before I arrived at Carolina, there were only 100 African American students out of 12,000 at Carolina. My class of 1974 was the first class of any significant numbers of African American students, approximately 100. The African American students at Carolina were close-knit, and most of those students lived on South Campus, and most of those students lived in Hinton James dorm. And during that time period, there was a strong black student movement called the BSM, and it had a great gospel choir. And the BSM held parties on the weekends at the Upendo Lounge on South Campus. Some of you'll remember that. African American students at Carolina back in the early 70s made rapid progress in a short period of time. I want to tell you about 3 students. Richard Epps. Richard was the first African American to be elected president of the student body at Carolina, and he was in the class of 1973. And this was a major milestone, and there was a lot of pride in that accomplishment. The next year, Alan Mask, also an African American, ran for president of the student body. Alan was one of my best friends at Carolina. He was pre-med, and he lost by just a few votes, by a razor-thin margin. And a lot of people say one vote doesn't make a difference, but every vote makes a difference, and that's a prime example of it. Alan went on to Carolina Medical School, and he became an anesthesiologist in Chapel Hill. Richard Epps went on to law school at Carolina, and he became a lawyer with the Justice Department in Washington, D.C. And then the next year, 1975, Marcus Williams was elected president of the student body in the class of 75, the second African American student body president at Carolina. So I said there was a lot of progress made in a short period of time. Let me say that life is about relationships. And there were 3 people at the university during my time period that were icons and had a tremendous impact on this university and on me. The first was Dean Hayden Renwick, called Benny Renwick. And many of you knew him. He was the assistant director of undergraduate admissions from 1969 to 73, assistant dean of the College of Arts and Sciences from 1973 to 77, and associate dean of the College of Arts and Sciences from 1977 to 1988. But that doesn't really tell you that much about who Dean Renwick really was. He was an institution at Carolina. He was hired to recruit African American students in 1969, and he told me once that the dean of admissions instructed him not to go to any of the major cities in North Carolina. He told him, you go to these small towns in the state and get your African American students. And Dean Renwick told me that he just ignored that advice, and he got the top African American students throughout the state he could find. But Dean Renwick realized after a few years that it was not enough just to recruit African American students. He needed to retain them and make sure they graduated. And so he set up a mentorship program where every African American freshman coming into Carolina would be assigned an upper class African American student as a mentor. And that was something that proved very successful. In later years, after I graduated from law school and started practicing law in North Carolina, my brother and I became the personal attorneys to Dean Renwick and very close friends of his. And I can remember his funeral service several years ago in Charlotte at a large church where African American alums from all over the United States came to Charlotte to pay their respects to a great man who made a tremendous difference to this university and particularly to African American students at Carolina, Dean Hayden Renwick. The second person I want to talk to you about briefly is Dr. Blyden Jackson. Dr. Jackson was chair of the Department of English for graduate studies at Carolina. That meant that every PhD candidate, master's degree candidate in English had to come through Dr. Blyden Jackson. He was the first tenured African American professor at Carolina. He was the first African American professor at any historically white university in the South, and he arrived at Carolina in 1970, the same year I arrived. He was short, about 5 feet 2 inches tall, with a distinctive mustache. He was a giant in the field of American literature. I would see Dr. Jackson walking briskly throughout the campus of the university from time to time. Excuse me. He always had books under his arms. He was always in a hurry. He always had on a suit and a tie. Early in my junior year, I ran into him one day, and I told Dr. Jackson that I know you don't teach undergraduates, but it would have been really great during my undergraduate career here to have had you as a professor. And he said, well, we could make that happen. So he set up an independent study course for me, and in the second semester of my junior year, I would go to his office once a week, and we would study some of the greatest African American writers in the 1920s. This was called the Harlem Renaissance. It was a period of time in this country for a decade in the 1920s where great African American writers came to New York, to Harlem, to write books and poetry. Such great writers as Langston Hughes, James Weldon Johnson, Zora Neale Hurston, and Countee Cullen, just to name a few. The Harlem Renaissance was a magical era which included the music of Duke Ellington, Bessie Smith, Louis Armstrong, Cab Calloway, and many others, and great black actors such as Paul Robeson and Josephine Baker. My independent study project with Dr. Jackson was a study in black excellence. Today, a building at this university is named for Dr. Blyden Jackson and his wife, who was also a professor at Carolina at that time. Dr. Jackson was the leading expert on the Harlem Renaissance in the United States, and it was a privilege to have had him as my professor. The last person I want to talk to you about is Charles Waddell. Charles Waddell was a classmate and a friend. He was the starting tight end on the Carolina football team. He was the last three-sport letterman at Carolina. Besides being a member of the Carolina football team, he was also on the Carolina varsity men's basketball team and a member of the Carolina track team. He earned All-American and All-ACC honors at Carolina in football in 1974. After graduation, Charles played in the National Football League with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the Seattle Seahawks, and the San Diego Chargers. And after his professional football career was over, he returned to Carolina and received his MBA in 1984, and he went on to be the assistant commissioner of the Big Ten Conference and later director of marketing and sponsorships for the Carolina Panthers, and is currently special assistant to the president of the University of South Carolina. Charles Waddell was one of the greatest student athletes in Carolina history. As a Morehead Scholar, I was never explicitly told what was expected of me. It was just understood that we were expected to be leaders on campus and outstanding students. I believed that if I did well, it would open up opportunities for other gifted and talented African American students to follow me. I was a member of the Carolina debate team at a time when Carolina dominated college debate. Our top debate team was comprised of two Morehead scholars, Joe Loveland and Joe McGuire, and they are considered to be the greatest debate team in the history of college debate, and that's saying a lot. The Morehead Scholarship Program was a pipeline for bringing in some of the top high school debaters in the country. The National High School Debate Institute at Northwestern University accepted the top 100 high school debaters in the country for an intensive program each summer before their senior year in high school, and my twin brother Harold and I were a part of that program. And there were other debaters who came to Carolina after us who were also a part of that program. Carolina had some of the top high school debaters. I think about two programs in particular. There were two high school programs in North Carolina, my high school, R.J. Reynolds High School, and High Point Central High School, that won the National High School Debate Circuit and sent their top debaters to Northwestern every summer. I was also in the student legislature at Carolina, and I represented Granville Towers, and this was at a time when student politics were civil. The student legislature was overwhelmingly liberal, but there was an activist conservative group on campus. The leader of the conservatives once asked me, "Kennedy, how could you be elected to the student legislature from Granville Towers when Granville is less than 1% African American?" I told him that it was not about race, it is about leadership, and I had the solid support of the Carolina basketball team. Of course, they all lived at Granville Towers. With respect to academics, I was in the freshman and sophomore honors college at Carolina. I became Phi Beta Kappa. I graduated with highest honors in history. My mentor was Dr. Frank Klingberg, one of the leading American historians in the area of Reconstruction. And Dr. Klingberg was Coach Dean Smith's best friend. I can remember many days after class that he would invite me into his office and we would sit down and we'd talk about American history and Carolina basketball and Coach Dean Smith and about my future. As a side story, Carolina had a good basketball team in the early 1960s and mid-1960s. And in the mid-1960s, Sports Illustrated put out this issue of its magazine. And they said that the top high school basketball player of the United States was a player named Rick Mount in Indiana. And they announced on a given weekend the top college basketball coaches throughout the U.S. were invited to Indiana to see Rick Mount play and to try to recruit Rick Mount. And so all these coaches were going out to Indiana hoping that if they got Rick Mount, they could win some national championships. But Eddie Fogler, who was an assistant coach at Carolina, told Coach Smith, "Coach Smith, the top high school basketball player in the country is not Rick Mount. It's a African American high school superstar by the name of Charlie Scott. And he's in Laurinburg, North Carolina at Laurinburg Institute. And you need to go down there and recruit Charlie Scott. And so on the weekend that these other coaches were going to Indiana, Coach Smith went down to Laurinburg, North Carolina, to recruit Charlie Scott. And he took with him his best friend, Dr. Frank Klingberg. And the two of them went down to Laurinburg and they recruited Charlie Scott. And it made a huge difference. Carolina went from being a good basketball program to a great and elite basketball program, and it's been an elite college basketball program ever since. Charlie Scott went on to become first-team All-American and take Carolina to the Final Four, and Charlie went on to have a great professional basketball career. But without Charlie Scott, there would have been no Michael Jordan. There would have been no Phil Ford or Walter Davis or Antoine Jameson or many other great African American basketball players. I remember talking to Charlie several years ago at a party in Atlanta, and I'd gone to this party, and it was made up of a lot of big givers to Carolina. And I think my brother Michael took me and my brother Harold and Charlie Scott and his wife were there. I think we were the only African Americans at the party. But I had a chance to talk to Charlie, and I asked Charlie about coming to Carolina. And he talked about what a difference it made for Dean Smith and Dr. Klingberg to come down to recruit him in Laurinburg. And then when he came up for his visit to Carolina, the basketball players took him under his wing, took him to parties, took him to a concert of the Temptations. But he said the thing that really helped him make up his mind to come to Carolina was when Dean Smith took him to Dean's church on Sunday, and he introduced Charlie to his entire congregation. And indeed, that was the future of Carolina basketball. So I just share that one story with you about Dr. Klingberg. He was a tremendous mentor of mine. And let me just close it out by just sharing with you some life's lessons, or words of wisdom that I would like to share with you. The first is to work hard and play hard. I went to a funeral recently of a friend of mine who was a longtime Superior Court judge in North Carolina, and one of the speakers said that the judge worked hard, but he played hard. Take the time to enjoy life. Live a balanced life. Enjoy music, the arts, sports, travel. Enjoy friends and family. Take time to smell the roses while you're here. And of course, working hard's a given if you're going to be successful in life. But it reminds me of a story. I went to a large high school, R.J. Reynolds High School in Winston-Salem. And back at the time I went there, it was known for great academics and athletics. We had 3 high school All-Americans at that high school in one class, a class ahead of mine. We had the top running back in football in the South. We had a 7-1 center on our basketball team. And we had a friend of mine named Thomas Little, who was a 3-time state wrestling champion, starting fullback on a football team that went undefeated for 3 straight years in regular season. And Thomas was the captain of our track team. We had the largest track team in the state. And what I recall about Thomas was he was always the first person at track practice. He was always the last person to leave track practice. When all the other young men were exhausted and could hardly make it into the showers, and we had to climb up a hill at Reynolds to get to the gym, you'd look behind you and Thomas would be running around that track. He was the captain of our track team. Thomas held the national record for high schools in the quarter mile. I ran into a friend of mine recently who was a former captain of the Carolina football team and who played in the National Football League. And he said to me, you know, Thomas Little never lost a race in high school or in college. But one thing I will never forget is Thomas Little told me one day, Kennedy, don't ever let anyone outwork you. I'll never forget that. So work hard and play hard. Second, give back. Serve as a mentor to these young students, these young Black Morehead scholars. I would ask all of our alums to think about serving as mentors. And finally, the word gratitude. I will always be immensely grateful for the opportunity given to me by the Morehead Foundation. The Morehead Scholarship provided me with the opportunity to dream big and to strive to reach my potential. In closing, when I was a child, the highlight of my year was visiting my grandparents each summer in Atlanta, Georgia. My grandfather was Reverend Mancy Brown, and he was a Baptist preacher. At Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, there were 3 ministers at that church: Reverend Martin Luther King Sr., affectionately known as Daddy King, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and my grandfather, Reverend Mancy Brown. And on a given Sunday in the summertime, when I was visiting my grandparents, I would go to that church, and Reverend Martin Luther King Sr. would preside over the church service. My grandfather would read the scripture lessons, and he would give one of those deep, moving, and fervent Baptist prayers. And after the choir would sing, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. would come up to the lectern, and he would give a sermon. His sermons were celestial, and they reached the heights of inspiration. I've heard some of the greatest preachers in America, preachers that many of you have heard of. I've been to see Joel Osteen in Houston many times. I've seen so many African American ministers. We used to have a special week in Winston-Salem where the top African American preachers would be brought in to speak each summer. A long time ago, there was Reverend Gardner Taylor, known as the Dean of Black Preachers from New York City. Reverend Bill Epps, the great preacher from Los Angeles, who was a minister to the stars and had a photographic memory, who could recite scripture passages and poetry off the top of his head. But I never was in the presence of any minister as great as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And when I heard Dr. King, and when I was in his presence, I felt that there was nothing I couldn't accomplish if I put my mind and heart to it. So I leave you with these words of inspiration from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. If you can't run, walk. If you can't walk, crawl. And if you can't fly, run. If you can't run, walk. If you can't walk, crawl. But by all means, keep moving. Morehead-Cain Scholars and Alumni, always dream big and keep moving. Thank you.